A Distant Plane by GMT. This is the sequel to a game that I played in the past, Andean Abyss. It is the third in the Coin Counterinsurgency series. The second was Cuba Libre. A Distant Plane is about the mess in Afghanistan, the political military mess that followed the fall of the Taliban regime. Now there are four factions that are trying to pursue their goals in Afghanistan. The game portrays this. It is a very hot topic, very contemporary topic. It may make some gamers feel uncomfortable. Some players will play the Talibans, and I see how that could be problematic for some people. But to me, this is a fantastic way to understand recent history, to understand the present, to see things from a poly perspective angle, to see really how the interaction between different forces works. To me, trying these interactions on a map, following very smart rules and a smart game system is just better than just reading them in a in a book, in a history book. It just gives me a better sense. I'm a very visual person. I like things that are hands-on. I can read a book, but to me it's harder to get a full picture of how things work, especially in military conflicts, when it comes to just reading facts one after the other. Nothing cements images and ideas better in my mind than a board where I can try and play different things. Again, this is just me, but I find that the games such as this one that improve our understanding of contemporary or historical events actually are just wonderful things to understand history, to understand reality. Some see gaming about serious topics as a way of demeaning the topic. To me, it's quite the other way around. I am a teacher. I teach in college. I fight every day a battle against people forgetting about things. To me, the most insulting thing we can do to history is to forget about it. Everything that helps us remember it and get a good grasp on reality, on events, on modern events, on distant events is good. A Distant Plane, I can already tell you, is a good picture, an interactive mobile picture of the situation in Afghanistan in recent years, and personally I like it. I can already tell you this is a game that I like a lot. Also, this is a game that I will not describe in detail when we talk about the rules because it would be a huge headache for me and for you. The game is not that difficult. There are just many things that are somewhat counterintuitive, that are specific to the system. If you played Andean Abyss or Cuba Libre, you know what I'm talking about. Of course, if you play those games, also you have a huge advantage here because the system is more or less the same. If you never played those games, it will take you a while before you really get into the system, before something clicks in your mind. And at that point, everything really ties together very well. But it is a system that is very thematic, which is great. But precisely because of this, it has things that you may have not seen in other games. Every time that you have this, there's a little bit of a trade-off. Highly thematic games need to have rules and mechanics that capture that theme specifically. That means that they cannot be easily translated from game to game. It happens here. It may take you a little bit. The rulebook, while functional, may not be the most friendly that there is out there. It feels a little concise. It feels a little bit like just a slightly reworking of the play rates with a couple of more words, but not many. It is a very dry list of rules and procedures, which is not, again, hard to memorize and to learn. It will take you a while to switch from understanding the rules, memorizing the rules, and going through them a little bit mechanically to really grasping the psychology of the game. And the psychology behind the mechanics and cycles in the game. So the rules of play are a great point to start. Of course, you should start from here, I believe, but you also have a great playbook that you really need to use, you really need to become familiar with, and I find that it has some very valuable sections, especially the ones that are a little more narrative and that give you, well, changes from previous games in the system, for starters, but also a thing that I really like is a summary of the roles. That is a section that tells you about the psychology of the different factions. It tells you in a little bit more of a narrative form what you should do, what your goals are when you're playing a certain faction. The game has 4 factions that are struggling for control of the region. The coalition, the international coalition of forces. The goal is to build support from the government and to get the troops getting the heck out of Afghanistan. The Taliban are not what they used to be, huh? So now that they are not the hot potatoes in the region anymore, at least not the main one, now what they need to do is to build a popular opposition to the government and establish their bases of political and military infrastructure in the country. The government, that's a tough one because it's a government that works in different ways from Western governments because it has to deal with a different culture, different population. So instead of just establishing a Western-style democracy, it needs to do slightly different things. Well, it does need to establish counterinsurgent control of enough territories and build a patronage. This is sort of like the different things from Western governments. It needs to build a patronage, the ability to dole out favors and gain influence with local leaders and power brokers. So it's not just about direct support of the people, it is about creating the necessary connections to have a truly effective connection with the territory and with the population. The warlords are just quote-unquote trying to mind their business. Problem is that as they do that, they try to destroy everybody else's business because they don't like people to get in the way. So what these warlords do is they try to build up a reserve of resources for the tough times ahead and to ensure that enough of the Afghan population remains out of the control of both the Taliban and the counterinsurgent forces. The less people get to develop strong ties with other forces, the better it is for the warlords because they like to exploit that sort of vacuum of power. Now, as for the rules, the game is card assisted, not card driven like in many other games. That definitely is a deck of cards, but the cards are not given to the players in hands. They simply stay in a deck, and there is a card that is available for the present turn, and the players can see what the card for the next turn is. The card will have different symbols, well, the same 4 symbols in different orders from card to card. That order indicates the order in which players have the opportunity to choose what to do in that turn. Again, 4 factions are in the game, but only 2 factions will be eligible to take actions each turn. Here you will place the markers of the factions. The eligible factions are here, and the eligible faction can choose to do something with the card in that order. In this case, the coalition will get a chance to choose first if they're eligible, then the Taliban, then the government, and then the warlords. Different events will amount to different possibilities, different orders will amount to different interactions. And then the first eligible party can choose to perform an operation with or without a special operation, or can choose to use the event described on the card. The second eligible faction has different options, which will depend very much on what the first player does. The first player influences what the options for the second player are. As you can see, the key mechanics are pretty simple. When it is your turn, if you're eligible, and when it is your order, when it is your round in the turn order, if you're eligible, you choose to perform an operation, you perform it. You want to perform also a special operation, and you can go ahead, perform it. Again, the general ideas are very simple. Things become much trickier when it gets to all of the possible operations, all of the things that players can actually do. And then you have these excellent player rates with a lot of information that simply tell you the options, these menus for all the things that you can potentially do when it is your turn, with your actions, with the abilities that your specific faction is granted. For example, if you are the coalition, some of the operations activities that you can do are to train, which simply will add governmental forces, support, will cut also patronage. You can patrol, which allows you to move your forces to protect line of communications. Sweep, which is a form of attack against enemy forces. And assault. Oh, it's too much light. There you go. And assault that will allow you to eliminate enemy forces can be combined with airlifts that are useful to move troops fast, or airstrikes. Surge, which allows you to add or withdraw coalition forces. Airlift, again, you move troop quickly, and airstrikes, just you get to destroy exposed insurgent units. This is because the insurgent may be exposed or not exposed, visible or not visible, underground or not underground, that's what I should say, because you can see where their pieces on the map are, but you do not, for all intents and purposes in the game, know the exact location. To pinpoint the exact location, which you need to do before you can attack the enemies, when the insurgent enemies, then there are procedures that you have to follow, actions that you need to spend. Government can train, again, to add government forces and support. Patrol, again, moving, sweep, and assault, which can be combined, similarly to what the coalition can do, can be combined with transport, which relocates troops quickly, and to eradicate, which allows to destroy more enemies, but also costs resources to the government. Govern, you add control population or patronage. As the government, you really are trying to consolidate your position as much as possible. And what is great in this game is that different players have different goals. So, for example, the level of support of a position in a region changes throughout the game, depending on the actions that the players take, the events that the cards implement. And having a good level of support and governance is great for the government. The Taliban are, of course, doing exactly the same. They're trying to build opposition for the government. The warlords can rally, where they augment or recover forces. March, which is a form of moving, attacking, and terror. Oh, terror is the neutralized support or economic activity. They place terror markers on the board, and that creates all sorts of negative effects for the coin factions. Cultivate, as they cultivate opium, and that helps them. That allows them to add bases. Bases are another key element in the game, and they're part of victory conditions too. Traffic, which allows them to gain immediate resources. If you played in the Abyss, you remember what the drug lords do. There are very strong similarities between the warlords here and those drug lords there. Suborn, which is when you neutralize enemy or hide insurgent forces, which is, again, sort of like cultural specific thing. It has to do with influencing the local population, creating personal ties as opposed to just economic ties. The Taliban can rally, march, attack, and do terror. I think you saw those things are similar in that to the warlords. But the Taliban also have some special activities. Hey, it wouldn't be the Taliban if they didn't do their own things. They can extort, which allows them to gain resources. Infiltrate, which lead enemies to defect. This is particularly annoying when you as a Taliban, annoying for the opponent, you remove 2 non-coalition pieces from an area, or you replace one with a Taliban guerrilla. Surprise! We infiltrated your governmental forces and now they are with us. Really irritating. Ambush, which ensures the success of an attack. Because attacking the opponent still has a random component which is resolved by rolling dice. unless you're ambushing. But again, there are limitations and ways in which that can be done. Ideally, the game is played with 4 players. There are flow charts for non-playing roles in case you have less than 4 players. Frankly, what I like to do is simply to assign multiple factions to a single player. An experienced player can play multiple factions. I just find it much easier than to use these flowcharts. I haven't played the game solitaire playing all 4 roles. It takes a little bit of a split personality disorder to do that, but it is still enjoyable and playable, and I think that I find that thinking from the perspective of the 4 roles and switching that perspective throughout the game is much easier for me than to use the flowcharts. But that is just me. The flowcharts are there if those are your thing. Very, very good game. As you can see, the general concepts will be a list of things, a list of possibilities that go around an overall pretty simple mechanics that interacts with cards and has a system of eligibility that gives players cycles of opportunities and moments in which players are kind of forced to rest. The general idea is simple. Getting to learn all of the nitpicking factors of the game is much tougher. But to me, the toughest thing is really to click into the psychology of the game, to start thinking as your faction is supposed to think, which is very important. For example, if you're the Taliban, you really need to learn how to be sneaky, how to destroy the infrastructures, how to undermine the power of the enemies, of the coin forces. I should really say you have to frustrate them. Frontal opposition doesn't always work. You simply have to frustrate them. As the government, there are specific challenges. For example, your governmental forces tend to dissolve over time because they can be infiltrated by the enemies and they can simply defect. After a while, they just get tired and don't want to be with the government anymore, and they just disappear into thin air. Every faction has its own challenges and limitations. Completely non-symmetrical gameplay, which personally I love. I liked Andean Abyss very much, and to me it was a great introduction to the general ideas of the system. But I like A Distant Plane much, much better. The mechanics are very similar. Playing the game was a great help here. There are specific things here tailored to the theme. But what really, to me, sets apart this game from Andean Abyss is not so much from the point of view of the mechanics, but just the theme. The theme, to me, is just much, much more interesting, much more relevant. As much as I learned about the Andean situation that was portrayed in Andean Abyss, the understanding, the insights that you can gain about the situation in Afghanistan by playing A Distant Plane are just very deep, and to me they're just more relevant because they have to do with something that is more direct, that that we have still to deal with, that is part of our culture. That is something that sooner or later you have to form an opinion about. A Distant Plane by GMT. This is a great game, not all that easy to chew, not that easy to swallow, especially at the beginning, but far from impossible. Just be patient, go through the rules one after the other, memorize the general ideas, play the game, even if you have to play it solitaire for a couple of times. Sooner or later, the psychology behind the mechanics will emerge, and at that point, you will have a very rich, very rewarding experience. I like this game very much. I highly recommend it. It can be an investment of energy and time at the beginning, but to me, it is all worth it.